What's going on, guys? We are back with another tour out in West El Paso. So we have some clients that recently got qualified and they're looking to buy a home out in the west side, which is essentially, if you guys have seen any of the previous videos, it's over by the Fort Bliss area. It's going to be close proximity over to downtown. It's a little further up than where you would be in your northeast area, central area, you know, the east side. However, with that being said, I wanted to also use this opportunity to talk to more of you guys about the incentives that you are able to negotiate with a lot of properties right now. So the fun fact here, and if you've watched any of the previous videos, you'll know the market is something that you definitely want to study. Whenever you are considering buying a property, one of the key components is to ensure that you are fully understanding why is it that people sometimes say it is a good time to buy and other people are saying it's not a good time to buy. Now, this is a fact. Real estate is one of the assets that is going to be a long-term play. Meanwhile, there's a lot of people that might be concerned about the fact that the interest rates had gone up. They're more so focused on the fact that they're going to build equity in the home and refinance once the rates start to balance out. And here's the fun thing. When you study the market, you notice the trends. You notice that what goes up comes down, what comes down has to come back up. Why is this important to you if you are a buyer in 2023 or going into 2024? Because what happens is that a lot of people just focus on what the media is telling them. If the media says green light, they go for it. If they say red light, they wait. But you need to ask yourself what's going on behind the scenes. A lot of the times when you stop and ask that question, you notice that there's a lot of investors that heavily invest when the media is saying do not buy. And if you don't believe me, look back at what happened in 2020, 2019 when COVID hit, right? So it has been known that is when a lot of investors buy overall more market share. Why is this important? Because if you understand the market, you are going to realize that it doesn't matter whether they're saying buy or don't buy. If you and your family are in a situation of being able to qualify to buy a home, you're going to do it because it's going to give you a vehicle to invest into versus burning your money away. And the way I like to see it, and if you've seen any of the last videos, we've talked about how you can get one of your properties and turn it into like an Airbnb or a rental home or a overall first guide to actually buying your home. But you'll notice that one of the most important things I always say is if you analyze your unique situation and you are in a situation where you actually can afford to buy and you're stopping yourself simply because of the rates, you need to ask yourself, isn't renting equivalent to 100% interest? Because last I checked, you're never going to get that money back. So as an investor, I like to look at the long-term play. I recently came back from London and I was looking at the rents out there, and obviously it's London, right? So oranges and apples, but it just gives you perspective. It gives you perspective as to what you can really buy when you are in a state of overall just having more for your money, right? Because in Texas, they tend to make the whole little slogan that says, you know, everything's bigger in Texas. We have so much land that if you compare to some of the properties that you would be getting out over there for maybe like a 2-bedroom, 1-bedroom, and you're paying $5,000 a month on a rent, you kind of gain perspective, right? And of course, like I said, you know, I don't want somebody to be like, oh, you're comparing London and Texas, like what in the world? No, but I'm giving you perspective because if you followed any of the videos, I like to focus on more of the positive than the negative, and we can always find negative to focus on. But when you actually look at the perspective and you see that you actually have the ability to qualify for a home, that's something you definitely want to consider. Overall, the numbers do not lie. So if you're in a situation where maybe you want to buy a home, but your lender wasn't able to qualify you, well, now back in November 16th, what they announced is that there have been some reports of the interest rates dropping. And this is good, but at the same time, I want to share my perspective along the perspective of other investors in the real estate market. Is as the market starts to balance out, what happens is that buyers lose more leverage because more buyers go into the race and say, hey, we're ready, we want to buy a home, let's do this, right? So meanwhile, there was a lot of buyers that have continued to buy. This year has stayed consistently busy for us. Why? Because they've understood that if they can qualify, they want to move forward with buying a home. And what this is allowing them to do is negotiate closing cost incentives, negotiate interest rate buy downs. So essentially, and I'll add a link for our video explaining a little bit more about the interest rates and how exactly you want to calculate those incentives. But what happens is, let's say you have a home for $300,000 times your actual 3% closing cost contribution. That is going to be something that you would be saving when it comes to getting into your forever home, or maybe your temporary home, starter home, whatever the situation you are in. Why is that important? Because you usually are going to have two major expenses, your closing cost and your down payment. There is a few other things you have to consider, and I believe we've already made a video touching base on those, but I'm going to briefly go over that. Your inspection, your appraisal, your earnest money, and of course, with that being said, all of these things vary. Earnest money is something that it depends. Usually it can be, for one of our clients, it was an off-market listing. It was a little bit above the million, and it was a 1% actual deposit that they had to do to reserve that property, which is the earnest money. They get that money back at closing. However, there's been other situations where it's just $500 because the house is, $300,000, $400,000. So it all depends. Now, the second thing is the appraisal. The appraisal is something that also varies depending on your lender. Some of our lenders actually provide some of our clients credits for that. So actually a lot of them, they don't actually have to pay for an appraisal. That is something you definitely want to talk to your agency about. Depending on the incentives they have going on for their clients, that is where you can determine what they're really able to do for you. For instance, we have a partnership with one of our lenders where for utilizing our lender and utilizing our services out of our own money, we give an incentive back to our first responders, to our military, to our teachers, to anybody that's active duty, anybody that's under a hero scope. And that is something that has helped so many clients just overall get some incentives back that you definitely want to ask your agent, hey, is there anything that you do for me that potentially could help keep more money in my pocket? So that is the second expense after we've talked about the down payment, the closing cost, earnest money, appraisal. And the last one, obviously, like I mentioned, is going to be something that it depends on the inspector that you're hiring. So if you're hiring an inspection company to go and look at the property, typically they're going to charge you depending on how big the property is. The bigger the square footage, obviously the more they're going to charge you. For instance, we have a lot of our inspectors that charge around $300, $250, but for the bigger houses, you're looking at $500, $1,000. It just depends, right? But the nice thing about that, just keep this in mind, okay? You do not have to hire an inspector, but I always recommend it because it's peace of mind. It's one of the biggest and largest investments that you're making in your life, and you want to make sure that it is a sturdy, solid foundation, right? So with that being said, they'll send you a report. It has all the deficiencies, anything that might be something you want to consider, asking the seller to fix. And a quick little tip there, make sure you're very clear with your agent when you're starting to look for that property. And this is what I mean by that. I've had some clients that have fired their last agents because they're like, no, like they never told me that we were not going to be able to negotiate any of our, repairs because we were in a multiple bid situation and they had other offers. Therefore, when we went in and offered price of the home and we asked for repairs, it basically eliminated us out of the competition. And you need to keep that in mind because think about it as a seller. If you are somebody that is looking to sell your home and in a situation where you have 3 offers and 2 of them are asking for repairs right offhand and 1 didn't, you're gonna move forward with this one. Or if you had none of them ask you for repairs, you go under contract with one that didn't ask for anything, but after the inspection report, it comes about that there's things that obviously, if it's a used house, are going to be known to come out, and you don't know how to communicate that. What happens is that they will not agree, there will not be a meeting of the minds in order for those repairs to be completed, and now you have essentially paid for, potentially you already ordered the appraisal, but you already paid for the inspection, and of course, it's your time. So they can decide now at that point, we're not going to do these repairs. They back out and they go with somebody else because you guys were not in agreement with the repairs that were needed for the house. So that's very important to overall consider when you are in this journey. So whenever you're going to start your process, make sure you're asking these questions. And the last tip that I've mentioned in previous videos is ensure that you are vetting your I cannot stress this enough. Ensure you're vetting your lender. Just like you're vetting your agency that you're working with, they should be able to also give you advice on what lenders typically they recommend. And here's why. We are not allowed to get any kickbacks. If you don't know what a kickback is, it's basically when the lender says, hey, for sending me business, I'm gonna give you an incentive. Although, putting that out there are some builders out there that have incentives going on like that with their lenders. So you always wanna look at the fine sheet, at the, the fine print. Now with us, we cannot do any of that. So when we're recommending you a lender, it's simply out of the fact that we have a good relationship with them because they've been able to take care of our previous client. So that is something you definitely want to consider. If you have an agency that you're working with and they only have one lender and that one lender said, I'm sorry, we can't qualify you, definitely start looking at other agencies, because if that's the only option they have, they don't have an arsenal of tools ready for you. Imagine I just like walked over here and then like, that would be so funny. I would not ask them to edit that part, by the way. Anyways, it's because I saw my foot moving and I was like, ah. Anyway, back to the story. So with that being said, ensure you're really doing that research, because the last thing you want to do is be with an agency that does not have your best interest in mind. And number two, be with the lender that honestly you feel like you're bothering, or honestly they're just not giving you the best rates, because what you don't know, you don't know. And if you didn't ask and your lender didn't tell you, then you probably missed out on some incentives. So with that being said, I'm gonna do a quick tour since we're already here. This is what $355,000 looks like in the west side. As you can see, we have a pool. This is a 3-bedroom home, over 2,000 square feet, located in a cul-de-sac. Beautiful outdoor landscaping, you'll see in just a second. And with that being said, thank you so much for watching. Thank you if you are a subscriber of the channel. We appreciate all of your support. And as always, if you have any questions, please feel free to let us know. I hope you have a great day.